Hi class, in this video we're going to set up our Dhcp server and our Dhcp relay agent. So we're going to look at our network map. So we have a Dhcp server over on the east side, but we have none on the west side. So if we had any clients over here, they wouldn't be able to get an IP address. So what we can do is install something called a relay agent. If this was Cisco terminology, they would call it IP helper. When a client wants an IP address, like say we had a client over on the west side, it would do a broadcast to the DHCP server. But because broadcast traffic can have a negative impact on your production network, broadcast traffic is limited to just that subnet. This router will not forward over broadcast traffic. So the broadcast traffic would hit this router and that's where it would die. So the DHCP server over here would never hear it. So what we're going to do is we're going to install a relay agent that will hear that broadcast traffic for an IP address, convert it to unicast traffic, and send it over to the DHCP server. Now, when it sends that request over, it's also going to send the IP address that it heard the request on, which is 172.16.0.1. And then when the DHCP server receives that request, it's going to give an IP from that same subnet. So we're going to have multiple zones here, multiple scopes here, one for this subnet and one for this subnet. If the DHCP server hears a broadcast directly, it'll give an IP address from this subnet. If it hears it from the relay agent, it will know to give an IP from the west subnet. So let's get started and configuring our DHCP server first. So the IP address will be 172.16.8.7. So I'm going to go over to the DHCP server. I'm going to pause the video while it's signing in. Okay, it's done. So I'm going to open up PowerShell. I pressed tab and it took a minute for it to find the command because I just opened up PowerShell. Again, that's one long command. That was hyphen, no space, I. I'm going to point to DC 3 and 4 for name resolution because I'm on the east side. I had to press tab twice after I pressed I to get to interface alias. I'm going to join it to the domain and reboot. Okay, I paused the video while it was rebooting. Now I need to sign in as a domain admin. That group policy kicked in. Again, I'm going to open up PowerShell and install DHCP. The reason why I have to reset that is because I'm signed in as a different user account. I'm going to include the management tools and restart if needed. This will take a minute, so I'm going to pause the video. Okay, it's done installing, so I'm going to exit out of this. My server manager has a 10-minute refresh rate, so it doesn't show me the warning sign. So I'm going to refresh manually. Now I'm going to complete the DHCP configuration. I'm going to create two groups, a DHCP administrators group and a DHCP users group. If you're in the administrators group, you can make changes to the DHCP server. If you're in the users group, you can view the settings for the DHCP server, but you can't make changes. I'm also going to authorize the DHCP server because it's part of a domain to allow it to pass out IP addresses. Click Commit, create the groups, and authorize the DHCP server. Now I'm going to create two scopes, one for the West subnet and one for the East subnet. Sometimes this is down. See these red down arrows? That's not right. So I'm going to right click, and I've only seen this in 2019. All task, restart. So now I have the green arrow, so I know everything is working right. So I'm going to say new scope. I'm going to call this West. And I like to put in the subnet as the description, not needed. The full range of IPs is 0.1 through 7.254. And we're going with the 21-bit subnet mask. I'm going to exclude the first 100 addresses to reserve those for servers. Allow a client to have a lease for 8 days. They'll request a new one in 4. It's called half-life. I'm going to also configure the DNS servers and the gateway. So the gateway for the West subnet is 0.1. I'm going to remove these. It pulled these from the IP settings. So it's trying to use the same DNS servers as the DHCP machine. But that doesn't work for the West subnet. We want to point it to 0.2. and 0.3. That's DC 1 and 2. So over on this site, we want them to use these two DNS servers. On this site, we want them to use these two DNS servers. We don't have a Win server. That used to be a form of name resolution that the old IBM, Microsoft collaboration, that's what they used. It should just go away at this point, but it's still hanging around. Just going to authorize the scope. Don't worry about it. If it's blue, just hit refresh and it goes away. So we have one scope for west. Let's do another one for east. Going to call it east. And the subnet address is 172.16.8.0/21. The first in the range is 8.1 through 15.254. And we're using a 21-bit subnet mask. Hold on one moment. Okay, so I'm going to exclude, again, the first 100 addresses for that subnet and reserve those for servers. Give the client the IP address for 8 days, refresh in 4 days, half-life. I'm going to configure the gateway and the DNS servers. So the gateway for the east subnet is 8.1. Don't forget to click add. The domain name is correct and the DNS servers are correct for the east site, which happens to be where the Dhcp server is. No Win server. Activate the scope now. Finish. Refresh. So I'm going to use one of my web servers. Since it's not configured, I'm going to see if I get an IP address. I'm going to pause while it's signing in. So I'm going to open up a command prompt. And I didn't really need to do anything. I have 2 network cards on this, and you'll see why in a later lab. You can see that the first network card got an IP address, and it is dynamic, and so did the second card. So I really didn't have to do anything. When I signed in, it requested that IP address automatically. So let's go over to the CA, the other site. This one's not configured yet either. So I'm going to run ipconfig all, and I don't have an IP address, which is expected. So basically, when this machine did a broadcast, the DHCP server was able to hear it. But when this machine did a broadcast, it never made it across this WAN link because this router won't forward broadcast traffic. So what we need to do is install a DHCP relay agent somewhere on this subnet and tell it to forward addresses to 8.7. The DHCP relay agent is part of routing and remote access. Since I've already have it installed on this machine right here, I'm just going to add it to that. So I'm going to go over to NAT1. I'm going to wait till the blue bar stops. So I'm going to go to Tools, Routing and Remote Access. I'm going to expand IPv4 and highlight General. Right-click, add a new routing protocol. I'm going to choose DHCP Relay Agent. I'm going to add a new interface to listen on. Remember, this NAT router has three interfaces. Here, the public, the WAN, and the West. I want to make sure I'm listening for DHCP requests on the West interface. So I'm going to right-click, new interface. I'm going to listen on the West interface for requests. And I'm going to relay it for 4 hops. Don't worry about that. I'm going to right-click, go to Properties. When I hear a request, where do I want to send it to? 172.16.8.7. That's the IP of the DHCP server. We got to keep refreshing for us to see any request. So I'm going to go back to the CA. Because it's not configured yet, I'm just going to use it as a DHCP client. I'm going to do ipconfig renew to try to get an IP address. Sorry, I had to sneeze. It got one, so I'm going to hit yes. So I'm going to do an ipconfig /all, and you can see I got my domain name. It's DHCP. I got the first available IP address. There's my subnet mask, and that IP address is appropriate for the West subnet. There's my gateway. There's my 2 DNS servers, so I have everything that I need. So I'm going to go back to the relay agent. Just going to hit refresh. So it received 5 requests. It received 2 replies. A lot of times it keeps sending out broadcasts to get an IP address if the DHCP server doesn't respond quick enough. So that's not abnormal. And it discarded 3 because the client already received an IP. So I'm going to go back to the DHCP server. And if I expand here and then go into address lists, I can see I have 1 for the west side, and I have 4 for the east side, 2 for www1 and 2 for www2. So that's DHCP Relay Agent. Some of you, I did this a similar lab in the last class. For others, I didn't. So I'm going to do it again just to make sure everyone has seen this lab. Okay, that's it for this video. We have one more video left, and that's going to be the last lab. Thank you.